Hello, travelers, and welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. My name is David McLeod, and I'm your Life Mastery coach. And what I'd like to start off with is just to say, fear is a natural response to certain kinds of stimuli. As many of us, well, as we probably all know, that we tend to respond to fear in a pretty common way that we know is fight or flight. Problem is, regardless of which of those options we take, we're often simply reacting to the emotional energy we are feeling without necessarily doing a full sanity check. I said before that the reason is justified. But today we're going to examine this phenomenon in a little bit of detail, and I'm delighted to be joined today by the queen of feeling fabulous herself. My guest is a registered nurse, Ayurvedic health practitioner, holistic health and wellness consultant, international best-selling author, speaker, and radio show hostess. He's the president of Blissful Living for You, which was founded to improve wellness, wisdom, and wealth by utilizing ancient holistic principles that only lead to success. So please help me in welcoming the amazing Rochelle Lawson to today's program. Thank you for joining me today, Rochelle. I'm glad you finally were able to get on, and I'm sure glad to have you here.
Thank you. I was here the whole time, but somehow it just kind of blipped out. And so I had to go back and, log back in. I don't know what happened because I could see you. I, been on for like maybe 20 minutes, diddly-dallying around. And then I looked up and the screen was blank. And then I'm like, wait a minute. And so I'm just happy that technology blessed us today.
Well, good. And I'm glad you're here. And I was going to say that's quite a resume that you have, Rochelle. And obviously you've traveled quite a complex journey. Can you share with us a little bit of your story of how you got onto this path of personal growth and wellness?
Yeah, it started, about, I want to say probably over 40 years ago, way over 40 years ago with regards to my journey when it comes to health. But for the last 30 plus years, I've been a registered nurse and an Ayurvedic nurse practitioner, as well as a business owner in a whole separate arena outside of health and well-being. And I think that my experience with my own wellness challenges that I had for 17 years and my experience in taking care of others, my background is emergency room medicine as well as trauma nursing. It just opened me up to the reality that my purpose is to share with people how they can be healthy and well, how they can connect their wellness to their wealth, which I always say, our wellness is our greatest asset that we have. It doesn't matter how much money you have. If you're not healthy and well, be healthy and well, what good is it to have the money? You can't enjoy it like you should anyways.
Yeah, right.
So my purpose is really to help people to understand the importance of their health and well-being, how really simple it is to manage your health and well-being, even when you have wellness challenges. You just have to know what to do and what to do what's right for you. And also, to build and sustain your wealth. And to me, or what I've discovered is wealth doesn't always mean materialistic things or money to people. Wealth could mean a wealth of family or a wealth of, task or fulfilling their purpose. Wealth could be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But when you connect wealth to wellness through wisdom, then you're able to actually step into living your dream life and living your purpose. And so That is what I'm here to do and here to share with people.
Right. Well, a lot of people, have heard me talk about some of the things that happened in my early life that, caused me to question a lot of things about who I am, what I'm supposed to be here to do, and so forth. Those events in my life helped to bring me to a place where I realized I had to do something to raise the consciousness of the world, which is how I ended up on this path. So were you always drawn to this kind of thing, helping people in their wellness and wealth, or was there some event in your life that triggered a belief or an understanding that this is where you were supposed to be?
I think I was born into really helping people. I my experience when I was a young child was I have a brother. I'm 4 years older than my brother, and my brother had severe asthma. And between me and my mom, we're probably the only two people that knew how to really manage him when he was having an exacerbation of his asthma symptoms. And so at the age of probably 7 or 8 years old, I started knowing how to take care of my brother. When I, at a very early age. And I wanted to be a nurse when I was a little kid, but as you grow up, things happen and you get dissuaded, and I ended up going to, college and getting an undergraduate degree in communications, and then went on to engineering school and got an electrical engineering degree. And it wasn't until some other things that happened in my life where I was like, okay, what do I do now? Led me to nursing, which was really interesting because I wanted to be a nurse when I was a kid. It just got kind of shoved under stuff, and it just resurfaced. So I truly know that my purpose here is to love and heal humanity and to help people to understand how they can love and heal themselves. And I would say, yes, I am the best nurse that anyone can have. I'm very intuitive. I could hone in on what's going on with people. A lot of times when I was in the emergency department working with my colleagues, my physicians, I would say this person has this, and they'd be like, well, what makes you think that? This is the doctor. And I, give them my rationale. But I always knew intuitively what someone had. I always knew intuitively those who were the sickest of the sick and those who had other things going on. And I was always able to share that information with the doctors. And lo and behold, I would be right. And so they would always joke and say, you should be a doctor. You should go back to school and become a physician. And I'm like, no, I think just being where I'm at right now, because I'm able to, one, help you figure out and discern things, what's going on with people. Sometimes things aren't always crystal clear. And two, I'm able to really touch base with the person that I'm taking care of in a different manner versus patient doctor. It was a patient relationship. It's a little bit different than a doctor patient relationship. And so I truly think that I really am finally doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But I am a phenomenal business owner, and I have 30 years of success as a business owner. And so I think just the combination of the two helps me to be able to connect wellness with wealth through wisdom. And I just say I'm divinely guided, and it's all intuitive.
Yeah, that sounds great. And you've used that word intuition several times now. And, I think intuition is unfortunately kind of cast aside by general society in favor of the logic and the reason and the left brain kind of stuff. And, I think I fell into that camp for a good part of my life, and certainly going through multiple levels of education and even becoming a master of science in computer science. I was very much focused on the reasonable, the rational, the scientific, the sequential. But after I started doing my personal growth work and I uncovered a lot of the pain that was deep down inside me and was able to release it, I started connecting into that intuition piece. I started becoming more right-brained. I started thinking more in terms of the non-sequential, of the connectedness of all things. And it was amazing to me how I can still have that scientific point of view, but be a more spiritual being at the same time. So, and really intuition, I think, is nothing more than my soul speaking to me directly. And soul, of course, is connected to all other souls. So basically, we're all talking to each other, is
Right.
kind of how I see it. And so I think that's where intuition is coming from. And the way you described it, it's almost as if your intuition is kind of tapping into the other person's knowing of what they need for themselves. And that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Thank you. I agree with you. Okay, so I do have that left side, right brain type of thing, right? Because I do have the electrical engineering degree. But I'm also very a passionate, feeling type of gal. Mm-hmm. And I agree with you with regards to intuition. I know from my own experience in my life growing up, when I did not listen to my intuition, oh boy, I had challenges that manifested that I wish I would have listened to the intuition. And so I learned from a very young age that whatever is inside me that's speaking to me, that I need to pay attention to. And I can't explain it. I can't explain how I know things. I can't explain how I can see terminal illness in people. I can't explain how I can tell who's actually really sick and who's not. I can't explain how I make business decisions that work out for the best for everyone. It's just, I think I'm just, like you said, my soul speaks to me, and God communicates to me through my soul, and our souls are all connected. So I think I'm tapping into the wisdom of the collective here on earth. And that allows me to do what I need to do when I need to do it. And it hasn't failed me. It hasn't failed me. So I truly believe in that. And I believe that's why I know I am the best nurse, and I know I'm a phenomenal business person. And when you know something, you know, you cannot not share that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of the whole idea of living audaciously, I think, is being willing to own all of who you are, being willing to share it, being willing to bring it out without any apology. You say, look, this is who I am. You can like me or not. That's your choice. And if you choose not to, that's also your loss. You know, you can use that kind of thinking. You know, most people are still connected into their ego minds, you know, and if we could get them to understand that the ego mind is great for helping us get around this physical world, but it's supposed to be our servant rather than our master. And unfortunately, many of us live by the ego mind. And I think this is what's causing all the problems that we have in the world. And they have this misguided idea that living audaciously means tapping into the ego, bragging about how great you are, without necessarily really understanding the energy that you're bringing forward. I mean, it's possible to be completely humble and still know how great you are, you know? And that's something that I like to get people to understand about themselves. But, you know, we talked at the beginning, I mentioned about this whole notion of fear and how we get fear coming up for all kinds of different reasons and so forth. And fear is something that is the playground of the ego mind. And so if we allow ourselves to get trapped by our fear, what we're really doing is letting our ego mind run the show. And so today we're talking a little bit how we can overcome this fear, how we can recognize it, what it all is, and so forth. So let me ask you this. First of all, where do you think fear comes from?
I think pretty much fear is a premise. I agree with you when it comes to connecting fear with your ego. And a lot of times people think that the ego is a bad thing, but sometimes, most of the time, it's actually trying to help us. It's really trying to protect us. Yeah. And when I say that, it sounds kind of crazy, and I know it does, but it really is trying to protect you from, you know, you facing something that you're fearful of, because what it really doesn't want you to do is face that and face that fear and then fail and then be down on yourself. So it's really protecting you from really getting down on yourself, but we don't see it that way. You know, there's all aspects of ego. There's a whole nother topic conversation, but my belief is that fear manifests in us from several different ways. It's either we have a lack of education, we're uncertain, we're really ignorant, we know nothing about it, or we have false information that's being provided to us or been given to us or being fed to us constantly. And based on those things, you know, fear can manifest. For instance, say you're walking down the path and you're fearful of snakes. You don't even know what. I'm going to give another story. Let me just rephrase this. Okay. When I was growing up, my mom was so afraid of mice. Okay. We're kids, you know, she'd see mice and she'd just freak out. She was so afraid of mice. And it got to the point that she projected that fear onto us. You just kind of absorb it. You're like, okay, she's afraid of this. I'm a kid. That's something I should be afraid of. Mm-hmm. As I grew up, I realized that why am I afraid of mice? They're just little bitty animals, right? They're more afraid of me than I am of them because I'm way, way bigger. So my fear basically came from a lack of education and ignorance. I have no reason, no understanding why she was afraid of mice, but my experience of being afraid was just based on what I saw her and how she reacted. Once I understood the fact that these are just little animals trying to survive, they're more afraid of me. The reason why they run so fast is because they're trying to run away from me. I got a better grip and I became not fearful of them. And so it's the whole lack or perception of taking on someone else's fear and internalizing it within yourself without even knowing why they have that fear and why you've internalized it. And so lack of ignorance, lack of education, false information, uncertainty, all of those things lead to fear. Another example I can give is someone that's in a job that they hate. They absolutely hate this job. Hate it, hate it, hate it. And there's other jobs out there that they could have, that they could take, that they could probably excel at. But because they're afraid to leave the job that they hate for the job that they might love.
Yeah. That's the fear of the unknown.
Exactly. They will stay in the job that they hate. Right. And that will cause all kind of internal processes and problems going on within them. And so those are just a couple of examples that shows, when you allow something that you don't really know about come up and scare you and make you afraid, it's something you need to dig in and ask yourself, why? Why am I afraid of this? Mm-hmm. What information am I lacking? Why am I uncertain? Same thing like with people who want to start a business. They have a job, they want to start a business, but they're afraid if I leave my job, how am I going to make my paycheck? Well, you'll never know staying in your job because, because you're afraid to take a chance on yourself. Right. And, we won't let ourselves fail. My thing is, if I don't succeed at being in a business, I just go back and get another job. So, there's no reason to be fearful. Now, there are some situations where fear comes into play where we need to fight or flight. That's a whole different aspect. But today in our society, if you think about everything we see, it's negative and it's fear-based. Commercials. If you don't buy this particular type of soap, well, guess what? Your clothes aren't going to smell clean. If you don't, if you don't drive this particular type of car with all these bells and whistles, guess what? You're not going to be safe on the road. If you are watching the news, it's so fear-based that it's just ridiculous. And, it's time for us to stop and take a look and say, okay, really, is what I'm seeing really fear? Is it really a threat to my safety, well-being, my survival? Or is it something that I'm perceiving and I'm picking up the perceptions of others? Because we're connected to everybody, right?
Yeah, this is a really important point because a lot of research seems to indicate nowadays, at least in psychological research, that we have only two natural inborn fears. And this is true of babies. The only thing a baby is afraid of is falling or loud noises. Fear of falling, fear of loud noises. These are the two things that we seem to be naturally predisposed to be afraid of. Everything else is something that we learned, something that we either learned from parents, we learned from our own experience, whatever. When you mentioned mice, the one that bugs me, I'm pretty fearless of most things, to be honest. But one thing that bugs me is spiders. Why spiders? I have no idea. They're mostly harmless. But I thought about this and I thought, maybe that fear comes from some remembrance, even perhaps from another life, where I was bitten by a poisonous spider or something like that. Who knows? I mean, I'm not going to try and explain it or anything. I'm just saying it seems to have no rational basis in the here and now, but it might have an explanation based on something that happened in my past or in a past life or something like that. So we can learn to be afraid of things from our own experience or from the experience of others. You see somebody break a leg, for example, and you listen to them wail and howl when they do that. You think, oh my God, I don't ever want to do something that might risk breaking my leg. So what do? We we suddenly stop walking across bridges or crossing roads, or who knows? I mean, we stop doing things because we believe, oh, I might accidentally break my leg. See? And so this is what you're talking about. We learn these things, and then what happens is, if you take a moment and examine just about anything that you're afraid of, I will bet 98% of the time it's completely irrational, completely made up, completely something up here. The other 2% of the time, there might be a real danger out there, and yes, you have to respond to it, absolutely. But most of the time, in the world that we live in, the things that we're afraid of are completely imaginary. They're 100% illusions that we make up in our mind. And so, but the thing is, to be understanding here is, it doesn't matter whether the fear is real or we think it's real. It doesn't matter. The response in our body is exactly the same. That sense of tightness, that sense of cold and clammy stuff that happens on our bodies, the thoughts that come along with us, I better not do this because, or this is going to hurt me, or this, whatever. All of this stuff happens the same, whether the fear is real or imagined.
Exactly.
And that's a powerful thing to understand. So what I tell people, maybe you tell people the same thing. If you're afraid of something and you can't see an immediate danger, then pause. Just pause and listen. What's your ego mind telling you? You know, listen. Oh, it's yapping at me about such and such and this and that, and I see, oh yeah, that's not real. It's all bullshit. And because I can now see that it's all bullshit, I can now take my ego mind, give him a nice big hug, and say, thank you so much for looking out for me and watching out and trying to protect me. But I got it now.
Right. For sure. I'm in 100% agreement with you. You know, when I was a kid, we used to get spankings back in the day when we misbehaved.
Oh, yeah. You and I were both part of the same, I think,
generation.
Generation, yeah.
Yes. And so, you know I'd be doing something and I knew I was going to get in trouble for it, but, while I'm out, I'm going to have the ball doing it. It wasn't until that walk home and trying to get in the front door that I realized, okay, yeah, I'm going to get in trouble. And it's true. You get the butterfly. For me, it was like I get the butterflies in my stomach. You start breathing more fast. Your heart, but here's the thing. Sometimes I thought I was going to get in trouble and I never did. And other times I knew I was going to get in trouble and I did. It didn't matter though, because either way or either situation, I still had the same things that come up in me. And so I ask people a lot of times, I'm like, think about a time when you were afraid, or whatever it is, perceived, real, whatever. Think about what happened in your body. And always, for everyone, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to get more, your heart's going to beat faster. You're going to start breathing more rapidly. You're going to take shallower breaths. You're going to have all this mind stuff go up in your mind about what shoulda, coulda, woulda, what might happen, we imagine all the most worst things possible. And then, like you said, I ask people to take a step back and ask, now, why are you afraid of that? Is all of that really worth what you're doing to your body? And recognize it. If it's something you're afraid of, like you're afraid of spiders, recognize that. Okay, I'm afraid of spiders. I have no idea why, but I'm afraid of spiders. Okay, once you recognize it, you call it out, you bring it up to the forefront of your mind right here, then you can deal with it. You can take the feelings of whatever it is you're afraid of and inside, and how it makes you feel inside your body. You can respond to that, and then you can say, okay, this is what I'm afraid of. This is what's happening inside me. Now, what can I do to move through this? Because whether it's real, perceived, or not, the same processes happen in our body. It's only when we need to be in that fight or flight situation, like you said, which is probably like 2% of the time, that we really need to act upon protecting ourselves from the fear.
Right. Yeah.
So I totally agree with you on that. Totally agree with you. And here's the thing. I know we're talking about being audaciously, and I like you mentioned something about, the ego. And here's what I want anybody watching this to know. You can be the most audacious person in the world, like me, and be super humble. A lot of times being audacious is not being bold and standing out and being flamboyant and, you know, all of that. And look at me, look at me, look at me, braggadocious, brag, brag, brag. It's not that. It's being able to take that step forward when you're confronted by something that you're fearful of, whether it's lack of uncertainty, ignorance, knowledge, whatever, taking that step forward and pushing through that. That's what makes you audacious. That what is a bold step forward. There's so many times people won't do that and they'll stay stuck. And so it's not about being flamboyant. I am often told that with all the success I've had and everything that I do, that I'm way too humble. And I say, well, because in my mind, if I'm doing it and I'm being all that, I don't need to brag about myself. People will see it. They'll get the essence. They'll get my energy. They'll have a conversation with me, whatever it is. And they'll realize that I'm just doing me and I'm just doing what I'm meant to do here. And so you can be audacious. I like that. Right? I'm doing me. Yeah. And you can be audacious and be humble and be graceful with it. And when you're that way, you resonate with many more people. Think about the people you guys know that are, I would say, they're always bragging, not humble whatsoever. Do they attract you? Do you want to be around them, or do you want to stay away from them? 9 times out of 10, you don't want that energy, so you want to stay away from them. But when you're humble and you can still be audacious, you attract people like you. You know, you're humble, but you're audacious. You know, you're going to go forth whether you're going to step on that spider and kill it or let it go run out the door.
Well, you know, I wanted to, I mean, first of all, I want to move forward on this whole thing about stepping into audacious living. But before we do, there's something that you were talking about, this whole idea of getting spanked. The thought came up and I have to bring voice to it. My mom would never, ever spank me. She had an even more devious punishment. Her punishment was, you wait till your dad gets So I had the whole day to wait for that to happen. Well, it seemed like the whole day. And then my dad would come home, and he was not enjoying this at all. But he was the one who was tasked with giving me the spanking. And I could tell it was a lot of pain for him to do it. So it's interesting to me that you happen to bring up that subject. It's a story. I'm going to have to remember this because it's a story that I don't often tell this. So, but you're right. It has the impact when you have that threat hanging over your head. It shuts you down. And this is pretty normal behavior.
Yeah.
And so even if the threat is real, like wait till your dad gets home, or it's just something in your head that says, if you do this, this is what's going to happen to you. It's a threat too. And when you do that, it tends to shut you down. And that is what keeps you from stepping more fully into the essence of who you are. That is what keeps you from being audacious. And whether you're humble or not is up to you. I recommend humility because I think that is people are going to be responsive to how you show up more than how you talk about how you show up.
Right.
As Rochelle said. So I'm glad that you brought this up. And now I want to just come back to another aspect of this whole fear thing. Because just because you have fear doesn't mean that fear is a bad thing. And so I think what we need to do is put it in the proper perspective, and let's talk a little bit about what we can learn from fear.
Okay, yeah, great. So one of the things that you can learn from fear, or something that makes you afraid, is that you have power over your circumstance and your situation. That thing, whether it's known or unknown, that makes you afraid, you actually have the power to change that. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that they do have the power. Whatever choice you make, you have the power. I think a lot of times people think that they're powerless, such as my mom being afraid of mice. Or here's another one. She was afraid of cats too. until she got a cat, until my brother got her a kitten, and she realized, oh, this is, now the cat is her baby, right? But for years, she went on being afraid of cats. And when we asked her, why are you afraid of mice or why are you afraid of cats? She would say, well, she could give a reason, but she would never step into owning the power of her having control to move forward. So her fear was perceived inside her mind, but it was actually a harmless type of fear. Once she took control, once she took her power, then she was able to realize that she did have control over the circumstances of being afraid of mice or being afraid of cats. And it changed her whole outlook on that fearful type of thing. So when you're afraid or when you're confronted by something that you're fearful, know that you do have the power. You do have the power to make that change. Whether you know it or not, you do have the power. And I think by knowing that one thing, that you do have the power to make the change, is hugely empowering to a lot of people, because a lot of times people give their power away to others.
Yeah.
And it's all about reclaiming your power for yourself, because no one else can do that for you.
Right.
And that's a huge, powerful, bold, audacious thing to begin to do when it comes to confronting fear.
Right. Well, that's a very, very important perspective, I think. The fact that you do have the power to change circumstances. Now, you might not have the power to change whether or not a mouse or a spider or some other thing shows up in your life, but you always have the power to decide how you yourself are going to respond to that. And you have the power to change the way you respond. If you don't like the way you're responding now, then look at it and say, okay, how can I approach this in a loving way such that I retain my power and I don't give my power away? That's I think a very, very important thing that you said. So I'm glad that you shared that. Are there other things that you know about that?
Yes. So here's the other thing. A lot of times when we are afraid to do something, it's like I said, it's perceived like we don't know enough about it. We're uncertain. We're ignorant about it. We have false information. But think about, why do you revert to whatever it is? Like, for instance, I'm going to just go with, mice. Why was I afraid of mice? Well, I started realizing, it's because my mom was afraid of mice. Well, what does it have to do with me? A mouse has never bit me. It's never jumped up on me. It's never, So what I realized was that I needed to step out of that situation of being afraid because I don't know, and observe, why am I afraid of this? Or what, or if it's taking a simple thing, taking a test, why are you afraid to take the test? Observe why you're afraid to take the test. A lot of times it's because we fall into this, what I like to call is like least action pathways in our mental neural processes. We've been down that road a lot of times, and a lot of times you're afraid to take a test because you're afraid to fail. But if you study and if you prepare for it, there's no reason for you to be afraid to take it. If you take your time, there's no reason to be afraid to take it. But a lot of times we just fall back into this mechanical way of thinking because it's a pathway we've gone down many times. It's a very worn pathway. And then we respond based on that. We don't respond based on, okay, I'm observing that I'm afraid of this for whatever reason because of this. It's an observation. Take yourself out of it. Observe why you are afraid. And then it's almost like looking at a movie. And I guess that's the best way. It's like, look at it as if it's like a movie. Observe what the character is doing. You're the character. Observe why you're like that. Observe why you fall back to whatever it is. If you're emotionally taxed and you like to eat, why do you resort to food? Or why do you resort from food? Why do you do that? Is it something you've always done? Where did this begin? You have the power to change that. The moment that you realize that you're just acting in a non-habitual or a habitual non-thinking, mechanical type of way to whatever the fear is, that opens up, my friends, infinite possibilities for you. Because the moment you realize that you stepped into a habitual way of thinking based on something you observed or something that you perceive that's going to happen at that moment in time, you have the power to change it, and the possibilities become endless. So observe, rationalize with yourself as to why you're falling into this mechanical way of behaving and thinking, and then step back and realize, now that you've realized why you're this way, the possibilities become limitless. And choose a different possibility, choose a different road, walk down a different road. Don't walk down that well-worn path of how you respond automatically when this situation or fear thing comes up. Choosing that, say, okay, today, instead of, me eating that whole row of Oreo cookies, I think today I'm going to go for a walk outside in nature. Because when you change,
cookies outside.
or better yet, instead of the whole row, take 3 and go for a walk outside in nature. You're doing double good for yourself. But, it's just changing that, what we call least action pathway of how you respond to things, changing that in the moment when you realize that it's happening, observing it and changing it opens up possibilities for you that you can not ever imagine if you stay stuck in that way of thinking.
Well, I think you've hit on some really good points in here, and one of them that really hit me that I want to just kind of bring out is changing perspective. You talked a little bit about being afraid of failing a test as an example. Well, if you think about failure for a moment, there are no great successes in this world that happened without some massive number of failures that preceded them. You think about anybody who appears to be like a great athlete or a wonderful actor or musician or something like that. Those people didn't get there just with a snap of a finger. They went through hours and hours and probably years and years of training. And they stumbled and they fell and they broke bones and they did all kinds of things. They failed spectacularly multiple times. But they didn't give up. Exactly. So what's different between them and you? Sure, you could say, well, I'm not a great athlete. Okay, maybe so. That you don't have to be. The point of the thing is, if you have some passion that you truly want to follow it. Yeah, you're going to fall, you're going to stumble, you're going to make mistakes. Think of them as mistakes rather than failures. Wasn't it Edison who said, it took me 10,000 failed attempts at creating a light bulb before I got one that worked? I mean, why? How many people would have stuck it out past 9,999 failed light bulbs? That's the thing. That's the difference between having that desire and really wanting to bring your message forward. And your message is is who you are. That's the thing. When you bring yourself forth audaciously, what you are doing is expressing your message in the world. And people won't hear it if they can't see it.
Exactly. And here's something else, you guys out there. There are no failures. I wish that word didn't even exist in the dictionary, because every time that you perceive something as a failure, guess what? You learn probably 2 or 3 things on how not to do that again. So It's not ever a failure. There are always learning opportunities for improving whatever it is you're working on.
Yeah,
I'm just amazed that Edison kept track for 10,000
well, I'm
times,
sure he didn't. No, maybe he did. I don't know. But even if he
had
didn't,
his assistant or somebody,
it's probably
do that.
accurate. To within a few. But he's not the only one. Think about, here's somebody who impresses me as well today. Elon Musk with SpaceX. Now, this guy has rockets that he's trying to fly up into the atmosphere and then have them come back and land. Now, how much do you imagine one of those rockets costs?
Right.
You know, a few $1 million at the very least. And yet, how many failures has he had? Every time they tried it, this thing would come down and fall over and explode and destroy not only the rocket, but the launch pad that it was landing on and everything else. He's had this happen multiple times. And yet, he didn't quit. And they were able to successfully take a rocket off from the ground and get it up into orbit and then bring it back down and land it standing upright on the ground. I mean, you think about it. That is tenacity. That is audacity. That is saying, I don't care what the universe throws at me, I'm going to show up. That's what that is. And anybody can do that. You don't have to be Elon Musk. You don't have to be Thomas Edison. You don't have to be Einstein. You don't have to be a great athlete like who's the basketball player, LeBron James. Sorry, did I get the name right? I don't really watch.
You did. It's just funny because I'm a huge sports fan, and so my baby is Stephen Curry or Michael Jordan, or even if we want to take it out of basketball, Simone Biles. She's the most decorated Olympic gymnast we've had in history, and I think about how many times has she done that particular move or the several moves that are now named after. How many times has she did that and didn't do it right?
Yeah,
so that she's got it right. You know what I mean? It's like, how many times did Michael Jordan shoot the ball 20,000 times before he was, when he got the game winning, he shot the game winning shot, it sank it. Or how many times did Stephen Curry practice shooting 3-pointers and to the point where his percentage is just so accurate. These people just did it. If they would have if they would have stopped at, okay, I've shot 100, or Simone, I've done that 3 times and my ankle hurts, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? They would have not been able to experience the greatness within themselves. And we all have that capability. We all have that capacity. It's just, don't listen to that ego. Just realize it's trying to protect you. Move past it anyways. It's like stepping over that spider. Instead of stepping on it, step over it, and move past it.
Sure,
because there's greatness beyond that. It's just if we could just get out of here and get into our hearts.
Exactly.
We would truly step into our greatness, and a lot more people would do it.
Right. Well, it's like Wayne Gretzky said. I think he was channeling Yogi Berra when he said it. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And that is true for any aspect of life. If you want to stay there in your comfort zone because your fear says, don't do this, don't do that, fine, go ahead, stay there. But don't expect anything out of life, because life is not just going to hand it to you. If you want to grow, you got to step outside that comfort zone. It's that simple. And the comfort zone is called the comfort zone for a reason, because inside that cocoon, it's like being wrapped in mommy's nice warm blanket in her arms. There's no fear there. Right? Well, if you're never ever going to, if you cannot tolerate experiencing any fear whatsoever, then you might want to just stay there for the rest of your life. But then it's not a comfort zone anymore. Then it becomes the dead zone.
Yes.
So you have to be willing to risk something in order for the universe to say, oh, so you really do want it, huh? And the moment you step a little bit beyond, then the universe is going to throw something else in front of you.
Yep.
And the universe is going to keep saying, are you serious? Or are you just bullshitting me?
I love it.
And that's what happens. So you have a choice. You can let your fear freeze you and tie you up in a tiny little knot and stay in the comfort zone all your life. Or you can step out there, be willing to make a mistake or two as you learn something new, as you grow and as you expand. And before you know it, your comfort zone will be bigger than it was before. Then you're going to get comfortable doing that, and you're going to say, oh, so there's now another layer that I can step into. You see, that's the beauty of the comfort zone. It keeps growing the moment you step outside of it.
Yes. Yes. And your possibilities become limitless when you do that. Just like what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing.
So I wanted to come back to this. Now, you have talked about multiple different techniques for kind of overcoming the fear and moving more fully into the audaciousness of who we really are. Now, can you just enumerate, you talked about a 5-step thing, I believe, over the course of this conversation. Can you just re-enumerate those 5 steps so that people can understand what it is that we're asking them to do today?
Yes. Okay. So the first one is, I like to say, recognize when you have fear coming up in your body. Recognize how it feels in your body, because when you begin to do that, anytime that feeling comes up, you'll know exactly what's happening. So the first thing is to recognize how you feel when you're in a fearful state. Everybody has a little bit of a different experience, but the important thing is for you to recognize how you feel when you're in a fearful state. Number 2 is to recognize what it is that you're afraid of, whether it's the mouse or failing a test or, quitting your job or whatever it is. Recognize what it is that you're afraid of and call it out. For me, I'm going to just say, it's afraid of, mice. We'll just use that. I'm afraid of mice. So I'm calling it out. I'm recognizing it, because when you do that, you make it more tangible versus this essence of something that's floating around in your head, so to speak. Once you recognize how fear feels in you, you recognize what it is you're fearful, then you can vocalize it. Okay, I realize I am afraid of mice. Okay, that kind of takes the heat or the punch out of it. So, I recognize that, I'm afraid of mice. I feel this way when it happens. I've said it out loud. Then I want you to find someone to vocalize. This is part 2 of the vocalization. Once you vocalize it to yourself, find someone else to vocalize it to. And sometimes that's not always easy to do, particularly if you're in a situation of, if you're in an abusive situation or something, you might be a little guarded with who you disseminate the information about what you're afraid of to. But you can always use this technique, and I love it because it's a trip, but it works so phenomenally, is to pull out a mirror or go to the mirror, look at that person looking back at you in the mirror, and look at that person in their eyes and say, "Hi, I'm Rochelle Lawson, and yes, I am afraid of mice." Okay. When you do that, what happens is, I can't explain it, but it's this phenomenal thing that happens. It's almost like you're speaking to your soul, and your soul is always going to protect you and always wants the best for you. So the moment you do that, you take a little bit of that bite, that spice, that pungentness out of whatever it is you're afraid of. The next thing I want you to do is don't discount it. Don't shove it back down. Now that you know how it feels, you recognize what it is, you've vocalized it. Don't be like, okay, I'm going to shove it back down. Because when you do that, what happens is it'll show up again, and this time it'll show up a little louder and a little bigger until you address what it is, till you recognize, till you put a name on it, whatever it is, until you actually address it, it's going to keep showing up. And every time it shows up, it's going to show up bigger and louder. You're not going to get away from it by shoving it down and not recognizing or owning it. And then the last thing I want you to do is to think of the one thing that you could do to push beyond what it is that you're afraid of. And for instance, like my mom, the one thing that I wasn't able to help her, but one thing that my brother was able to do for her with her fear of cats is to get her a kitten. Now, who can be afraid of a little bitty kitten? But of course, the kitten doesn't stay little, it grows up and it becomes a cat. But just her taking that step forward of embracing the little kitten and making that kitten hers and giving that kitten a name and watching and taking care of that kitten and watching it grow up into a cat, it tarnished her fear with other cats. So do that one little thing that you can do to push you forward through the fear, whether it's, writing an email or writing in your journal about it, or, if you're afraid to take the test, take it anyways. If you're afraid to get behind the wheel of a car after a bad car accident, go do it anyways. You don't have to necessarily drive the car, but taking that first step and just sitting in the car, whether you sit on the passenger side or whether you sit behind the driver's side, behind the steering wheel, taking that step forward is going to ease all the fear that comes beyond us not knowing and perceiving the worst things that's going to happen to us. That, my friends, is the bold, audacious step, is taking that little tiny step forward, because the next time you take another step forward to push through that fear, it's going to be a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger. And then pretty soon you're going to be taking giant steps forward, and then it's going to be a thing of the past, onto the next fear, so to speak. But those are my 5 steps, and they're pretty simplistic, pretty basic. You can do them in any time. Your fear of public speaking, recognize that, feel how it feels inside you, vocalize it, and then go ahead on and take that step forward and go out on that stage and speak. Of course, in the beginning, it's going to be quite scary and quite unsettling, but the more you do it and the more you get into it, if you're like me, you're not going to want to get off the stage, and then people are going to be like, girl, I could not even imagine you being afraid to go out and speak on stage or speak out in public. And you're like, yeah, I actually was very afraid, but I took that step forward, and once I stepped out there, I knew I couldn't go back. And that, my friends, is the bold, audacious move that will push you through your fear. And those are the 5 steps that lead to that.
That's great. So I'm going to summarize here what I heard. First, recognize when you are feeling fear. Second, recognize what it is you are afraid of. Third, vocalize, first to yourself and then to someone else, whatever it is you are being afraid of. Fourth, rather than trying to hide it or shove it down, honor it and express it. And fifth, try to identify one small step you can take to move past this fear. Did I summarize that correctly?
Fabulously. You get an A.
All right, excellent. Well, we've almost run out of time here, so I just want to say thank you so much for helping me to cover so much ground on this topic of living audaciously. It's been great to have you here, and I'm grateful that we were able to figure out whatever the technical problems were and resolve those issues. I hope people got something out of this show, and thank you so much, Rochelle, for being here.
You're very welcome. And I just would like to offer anybody watching a free gift, and it basically is a summarization of what we just spoke about with regards to walking through fear. You can just go to my website, click on Be Audacious, 5 Steps to Conquer Your Fear program. You can get a free gift, and it is what we just shared, but it goes into a little bit more detail to help you systematically move through conquering whatever fear it is that you have. And also, people, I just want to say this as a disclaimer. If you're in a fearful situation where it's abusive or maybe harmful to yourself, go seek out, whether it's to a family member or a friend or a stranger, seek out and get some help, because I wouldn't want anybody to stay in a situation that could be potentially harmful and dangerous to them or their loved ones because they're afraid of what that person may do if they find out they're seeking to get help. So please, please, please get help if you're in that type of situation. But for regular, everyday, fearful challenges like, what we're talking about, go to my website, which is blissfulliving, 4 and the letter U.com. Click on Be Audacious, 5 Steps to Conquering Your Fear, and pick up that free gift, and it will become invaluable. And share it with everybody you know, love and care about, your kids, your mom, your dad, your whoever, and have fun with it and watch how your life miraculously changes for the better. Remember, it sets you up for infinite possibilities, and they become endless.
Well, thank you, Rochelle. I appreciate that, and thank you for offering that gift. So that's blissfulliving4u.com, blissfulliving, 4, the letter U.com, and then just click on the link for the Audacious Living download. So That brings us to the end of our program. I want to thank you all for joining me today and watching and participating. Remember, you can watch recordings of this show and all my other shows at lifemasterytv.com. That's life-mastery-tv.com. And also, remember the weekly practice of reciting the Life Mastery mantra. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, thank you so much. I am David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your journey. Bye-bye.